Welcome! In this explainer, we're going to dive into a really powerful concept from cognitive behavioral therapy specialist Veronica Walsh. It's an idea that could completely change how you react to other people, especially when they really get on your nerves.
All right, let's start with a question. Do you ever find yourself getting really angry at what you see as bad people doing bad things? You know that feeling when someone cuts you off in traffic or says something rude and you just instantly label them as a terrible person? It's a really common thinking habit, and honestly, it causes us a ton of unnecessary upset. And it sounds a little something like this, right? She's a bitch. He's a selfish pig. We've all heard these, and maybe we've even thought them. But according to Walsh, when we use these absolute black and white labels, we're essentially condemning a person's entire identity based on a single action. And thinking like that, well, it's pretty much a recipe for feeling angry all the time.
So what's the way out of this trap? Well, it all starts with a simple, but honestly profound shift in how we think. It's about redefining what behavior actually is.
Here it is. This is the core idea from Walsh's work. Behavior is a verb, not a noun. It's something we do, not something we are. Just let that sink in for a second. This simple idea separates a person's identity from a single temporary action. They acted selfishly. They aren't necessarily a selfish person through and through. See the difference?
Okay, so that sounds good in theory, right? But how do we actually apply this in the heat of the moment? Well, there's a practical technique for it called rational reframing, and it's all about changing your internal language. So let's take a classic irrational thought. He's cold and unkind. You see how absolute that is? It's a total judgment. It's not describing what he did, it's defining who he is as a person. It leaves zero room for any other possibility.
Now check this out. Look at the reframe. I think he can be quite cold and unkind sometimes. The change is subtle, but it's huge. Just adding I think acknowledges that this is your perception, not some universal fact. And adding sometimes, that turns a permanent personality flaw into a temporary action. Instantly, the thought becomes cooler, more rational, and way more based in reality. And you know, this isn't just some clever little life hack. This whole technique is built on the foundational work of Dr. Albert Ellis, who was one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century and a true pioneer of CBT. And this chart just illustrates the difference perfectly. The irrational belief says some acts are just wicked, and the people who do them should be condemned. But the rational belief, it says, okay, that action wasn't great, it was self-defeating, the person who did it is probably behaving out of ignorance or some other issue, and what they really need is help to change. It's a massive shift from condemnation to understanding. Now, this leads us to another major cause of our own emotional turmoil, these rigid and flexible rules we have for how other people are supposed to behave.
And Walsh points out this critical distinction. It is perfectly rational to have preferences. Of course, you'd prefer people to be kind and considerate, but the problem starts when those preferences turn into irrational demands. When you think people should and must act the way I want, you're setting yourself up for constant frustration because, let's face it, you can't control other people. Shifting from demanding to preferring, that is a total game changer for your own peace of mind.
And this quote from Dr. Ellis just sums it all up so well. We have this idea that our misery is caused by outside events, by what other people do to us. But what his work shows is that our distress is actually caused by the view we take of those events. It's the story we tell ourselves. At the end of the day, the only person who can really cause you aggression or anxiety is you.
Okay, so we've got the theory down. But how do we turn all this insight into a new, healthier default habit? How do we actually rewire our brains to think this way automatically? Let's get into the practical side of things.
Here's a simple 4-step process you can use. First, you just have to start noticing your own self-talk. Listen to those thoughts. Second, when you catch one of those hot, irrational beliefs, literally tell yourself to stop. Just interrupt the pattern. Third, consciously replace it with the cooler, rational self-talk we've been discussing. And finally, step 4, write it down. Journaling about this stuff is a super powerful way to make that new way of thinking really stick. So we'll end with this final, powerful thought from Veronica Walsh herself. Nothing is about you unless you decide it is. It's such a great reminder that you are in control of your own narrative. Most of the time, what other people do is about them, their issues, their day. You hold the power to decide if you're going to make it about you. Think on that.